Hi, everybody. Well, Bon is getting her stuff up. I'm Becky Heil, the district consultant at Southeast, and I'll let Bonnie talk a little bit more about what we're going to be doing today. Bon, we're still seeing all the slides. There we go.
Which one are you looking at?
We are seeing the right version now.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm Bonnie McKewon with the Northwest District Office of the State Library, and this is Acting on Input, a three-part series that we started in July. And if you joined us in July, we looked at gathering community input through focus groups. Today's installment is about gathering community input through surveys.
Hey, Bonnie, I'm just going to jump in for 1 minute. On my view, we did change back now to the presenter view on PowerPoint somehow. So if you want to do the swap.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So today's show is about gathering community input through focus groups. Becky and I have...
Through surveys.
Through surveys, sorry. Last month was focus groups. Today is surveys. And next time we gather in September, we'll talk more about the results of the feedback that you're getting from your community by rolling those results into your strategic plan. So for today, we'll hit the highlights by sharing our experience in working with Iowa Public Libraries. True confession time, there you see on the slide, surveys or not, kind of a tongue-in-cheek, maybe inside joke. Becky and I are pals and we agree on a lot. And we have long agreed that we're not big fans of surveys, which would seem kind of counterintuitive to why we're doing this program today. But hang in there with us. It's just that we're not big fans of all-purpose general community surveys, which tend to be the top of mind go-to when libraries are looking for some kind of feedback and some kind of input. General all-purpose surveys tends to be what people think of to do first. We prefer surveys that are more targeted and questions that are more specific. Because when you have more specific surveys, more targeted questions, I think you'll get back more actionable data, making time spent just all around better in the survey effort. So we will talk today more about being more intentional with surveys. And just because we know that focus groups might not be everyone's cup of tea, there are some other ways that you can gather input from your community. And here in Iowa, I know Sam mentioned we have some visitors joining us from Colorado, which is very cool. We know here in Iowa that the State Data Center is just a very authoritative, very, very good resource for community input, where you can pull up your city's demographics and county demographics for that matter. There's a great resource within the State Data Center called City Quick Facts. Using that gives you a very legitimate source of data for your planning purposes. That certainly meets the standard here in Iowa, the planning standard. So you can definitely use the data that you pull from Iowa State Data Center. The trick, though, is that you need to make the case for how this city data that you're gathering informs the choices you make about your library programming, your library services.
And Bon, can I jump in really quick?
Of course.
One of the things that I always like to talk about, well, part of the reason I have been telling people not to use the data information from the census is because it's 10, 12 years old. What we have right now are some general population things, but when you really start to dig into it, you get data like what percentage of your community are commuters, and how far is their average commute. So you can use that data to think about your hours. If nobody gets back to town until 6 o'clock, or 70% of your population, has got a commute and they aren't getting back until 6 o'clock, then that really informs what your hours are. So for me, that's the kind of data that you can really use, population, certainly the other things, socioeconomic data helps a little bit, but there's lots of really great stuff in there if you dig a little bit farther. And that's not out yet for the current one, but it will be coming. So keep an eye out for that.
Thank you, Becky. Yes, the 2020 census numbers will be certified or fairly soon, we understand, to make all that more reliable, more authoritative. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the commuting data, because I always like to point that out to libraries. That really is such a good number to look at. And we hope too that if there are any planning efforts that are going on across your city, maybe the city government has launched some kind of a planning effort where they're trying to gather feedback from the residents. We hope to shout that the city library would be included in that kind of an effort, as would all other city departments. So that's certainly worthy of looking into and finding out if that's on the horizon. And then, of course, there are surveys. One of our favorite products out there on the market is Project Outcome. That helps libraries look at the impact of their service and their programming, and we'll have more to say about that in just a bit. So these are some ways to gather data. And these are essentially the 4 things that surveys are trying to measure. One of the reasons we're not big fans of general all-purpose surveys is because studies have shown, so many studies have borne this out, that if you ask the question of people, how would you rate library services? Studies have shown that 75% to 80% of people answering that question will answer fine, good, okay. I guess that's a feel-good answer, but it doesn't really help you move the ball farther down the field, really. If there's a project you're working on, if there's a problem you want to solve, if there's a specific questions or set of questions you want answered. So those kinds of general questions are okay, but more intentional questions with more an intentional framework behind them, I think will give you back better results. So for level of awareness, how much do people know about what the library has to offer? That's a good thing to find out. What about their level of satisfaction? How satisfied are people with what the library has to offer? And not just generally globally speaking, like how would you rate the library services, but be specific with questions like that as well. The level of support is something that's not very often asked, at least in my experience, in the times that I've looked at surveys and offered to critique them for libraries. I don't often find people asking the level of support questions, but that's, and we'll have more to say about that a little later too, but things like, how many people would support the library in a capital campaign if there were a major effort afoot to try to build a new library building or do a major expansion or renovation? But there are other things you can ask about level of support that we'll get to. And then the level of impact is such an important, those are such important questions to ask, because that speaks to what difference does the library make in people's lives? What difference does it make in people's success in education? What difference has it made in people doing some job searching? How about in improving reading skills or even technology skills? If you're looking for those impact kinds of answers, then impact surveys are the best way to go. And with that, Becky has more about one of our favorite products out there called Project Outcome.
Oops, sorry, that's me. I'm just off in space here. Again, as Bonnie said, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I like Project Outcome for two reasons. The first is they are pre-made surveys, and they have been done at a level that we as librarians don't always have the ability to know the right way to word a question, to make sure that what we're asking is going to get us what we really want. So they have used experts to help with these questions. They've also done the research to find out how many questions do people want to answer. After a story hour, if you're going to ask someone to do a survey, do they want 12 questions? Do they want only 2 questions? So they've done all that research and they've put these together for you. The second thing that I really like is not only do they have these pre-made surveys, and we'll take a look at those on the next slide, but they also have a lot of research that you can actually look at and read about surveys, about libraries, and the best way to do those surveys. And so they've gathered a lot of information all in one place for you when you're thinking about doing surveys. So one of the things that I have been talking a lot about as I started to learn a little bit more about it is the difference between outputs and outcomes. Outputs we're all really good at. You do a program and you have 15 people that attended and 8 of them were adults. When you're talking about outcomes, that's what Bonnie is talking about, that level of impact. What has changed in someone's life? Those are the kinds of things that we're hearing people want to know, whether it's your funders, whether it's IMLS. You will know, those of you who got ARPA grants, we're going to be asking that question, not what did you spend the money on and how much did it cost, but whose life changed because of this money that we gave to you at the library. So what kind of impact are you making on your community or on individuals? It's a lot harder to measure that, and that's one of the reasons we recommend using the project outcome surveys, is because that's what they're getting at. So if you want to look at the next slide, those of you who have not looked at project outcome, like I said, they have lots of research and papers and articles that you can read, but they also have surveys for each of these specific types of programs and services that you do at your library. So if you have done a program on health, you had a health nurse come in and she talked about diabetes, or a nutritionist come in and talk about healthy food. Instead of having to write your own survey, you can go out and grab this health survey that they have, and they will have, I believe it's 5 to 8 questions. I forgot to look that up. Actually, I do have that. Hang on just a second. The other cool thing that they have done is not only do they have an immediate one, so as the program is finishing, you hand someone a survey, or the day later you email them the survey, but they also have surveys that are a little bit farther down the road. So if you think of something, let's take the digital learning one. Maybe you did a program on how to use Libby, or you did a program on one of the databases that you have. So they have a 6-question survey that you can either hand someone as a printout, it's a nice PDF, or you can actually give them a link to the survey that is out there, and then it will gather the information automatically and it'll all be tabulated for you online. So that's another really great piece of Project Outcome, is it does all those tabulations and graphs for you. So one of the questions that they ask, they don't ask, did you like this program? They say, do you feel more knowledgeable now about using digital resources? That means you as a librarian made an impact on them. Your program has changed their life. Now they feel more comfortable or confident using those digital resources. They also ask a question about, are you going to use what you learned? So if you went to a session from a nutritionist, is that something that you're going to now take forward? Again, that gets at that impact. Then the questions that they have on the ones that are, those are actually the ones from, yes, those are the ones immediately afterwards. So now they have some, maybe you wait a month and you send out a survey to everyone who attended that. So it's a little bit, it's more of a follow-up. So now the questions become, I completed a task that I could not do or I couldn't do as well before. So again, you maybe taught them in digital learning, how to use Libby. Now you can ask them a month later, did you use that information that we taught you? Or I used those digital skills to do something new or different. So same thing, 5 or 6 questions, no more than that. And they've got those short-term impacts as well as the long-term impacts. So those are just a couple of the reasons that I like it. So again, I highly recommend you take a look at that. It's free. It's done by the Public Library Association, and it's out there for anybody to use. The other cool thing is we as the state library get to see some of the results. So from some of those programs that you've done, we actually have access to those. So that's a really great thing for us. So we can see what types of programs you're doing and what kinds of results you're getting from them.
And it only takes setting up an account for
Right.
the library to get rolling with that. Well, how coincidental could this be? Just yesterday, our state library here in Iowa sent out a survey asking those libraries in Iowa who were recipients of CARES Act funding from last summer. You'll remember you would have received from the State Library of Iowa PPE kits last summer, and we also launched the Bold 360 chat service last summer. Those were 2 initiatives that we paid for through our share of the CARES Act funding. In 2020, we just launched a survey asking you, we even are saying, we want to hear the impact of this on your library. So if you haven't seen that survey, check your email or let Becky or I know. We'll get you the link, and we'd love to have you chime in on a survey that we just launched just yesterday. So in the interest of time here, we really don't intend to speak to each point that's on these upcoming slides. We don't need to read the text to you. We wanted to include these general survey principles, whether you're doing a big all-purpose survey or whether you're being much more targeted. These are still really good questions to ask up front on any survey you might design. And if you want to come back, circle back to this presentation, this is being recorded, but we'll also provide the slides to you as well, those of you who can access those through Iowa Learns. But these are just some common survey principles. We'll kind of flip through some of these just kind of quickly, but the one I would point to on this slide is do steer clear of library jargon and acronyms. We have a lot of that in the library profession. There's probably a good share of that in every profession, truthfully, but we do have a lot of it in the library profession. So if you're doing a very targeted kind of a survey on using bridges, you might want to couch that in terms of the library's ebook service, for instance. So that's just a kind of a cautionary tale there. It always helps too to have another set of eyes, or 2 or 3 more pairs of eyes, kind of look at your survey questions before you launch it and send it out to the people you hope will answer. We're happy to do that for you. Those of us who are consultants at the State Library, I've looked at a good number of surveys in my day. I suppose, Becky, you have too. Just try to avoid loading too much into one question. For instance, if you were to ask the question, is the library strong or lacking in any areas, into one question, that's hard for people to answer. So if you want to ask the question, break it out into 2. Is the library strong in any areas or lacking in any areas? Another corresponding too much question like that would be, how would you rate the library's programming and other services? Break that out as well into programming and give people some indicators of what you mean by programming, and other services. Give people indicators of what you mean by other services. Personally, I'm not a big fan of responses where you're asking to have people rate things according to 5 different levels, 1 through 5, 5 radial dials. I think there's so much nuance in that I prefer only 3 choices to be made. Good, poor, and excellent, I think is gonna get you the answers you're looking for. And then another cautionary tale is that you want to avoid too many open-ended questions. They can be very good in that they bring you back what we think becomes some really good testimonials, some really good opinions, and feel-good kinds of answers can come to you from open-ended questions. But it does take your respondents longer to answer. It's harder to tabulate, and open-ended questions maybe those don't give you as much actionable data. Lots of good testimonials, but maybe not as much actionable data. So kind of keep those to a minimum, but we do have some good ones to share with you, some of our favorites, some of our favorite open-ended ones. These come to us from OCLC research, so it's kind of hard to beat OCLC when it comes to really good questions to pose. You can't go wrong if you want to borrow some OCLC questions to use for your own purpose. I like these. List 2 positive associations with the library or 2 negative associations. And if you could provide a piece of advice to your library, what would it be? Those, I think, are really very valid, and I think you would get back some interesting responses to those. And we also like these. These are open-ended survey questions that Sioux City Public Library recently used. What do you value most about the library, and how does the library benefit you or the community? Responses to those questions, I think, really will get at the impact, the difference that your library programming, your library service, just having a library presence in the community with access to print collections and digital collections, how does that benefit the residents who live there? So we like these open-ended questions as well. And as Becky mentioned with Project Outcome, in addition to those 8 pre-designed surveys that Project Outcome offers you, Becky mentioned that there's so much other good information on their website. It is, I think you're so right when you say it's just a great one-stop shop to kind of start to gather a lot of articles and some good background reading behind surveys before you really get started banging one out there. And they've got this piece, good advice for writing open-ended survey questions. This is a helpful page. And I was actually tickled to see that so many of our general survey tips, our general survey principles that we just looked at are echoed here on Project Outcome as well. Shall we pause there for any questions or comments, or are you ready, Becky, I haven't looked at the chat to see if there are questions that have come in. We certainly will allow time at the end, but if there's anything pertinent that's come up so far.
I haven't seen anything come through. If anybody's got one now, feel free to type that in the chat. Otherwise, I think I'm ready to move on. And is this me? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So one of the, I like the way Bonnie sort of titled this one, Most Effective Survey Techniques. Again, the point of doing a survey is to get information that you can actually use. How are you going to act on the answers that you get? And that really, I guess, would be my #1 pointer, is to make sure you have a purpose behind that survey. It's not the state library said we have to do a survey, so we'll just throw this general one out like Bonnie has talked about. Do you want to know, do the hours work for your community? Or do you want to know, should we be doing a toddler or a baby story time? Or do you want to know, are there a lot of seniors who would like to know how to use their tablets and their digital devices that they have at home? What is it that you're trying to get at? Once you know what the reason you're doing the survey for, it's going to be much easier for you to craft that survey and get something back that you can actually use in the end. This is sort of a sidelight here, and I don't know that Bonnie even knows that I was going to tell this story. I was part of a team that was putting together a survey a long time ago, not at a public library, but involving libraries. And you always throw out that question, what do you think about this? And you get back this variety of things. I hate that you guys do this. And the next person says, I love that you guys do this. What information does that give you? There's nothing that you can do with that information at this point, except to say, I guess some people like us and some people don't. So the best way to get that actionable data is to use those preset choices. Bonnie's got some examples here of, do it by time. If we're going to revamp our book discussion, which would work for you? Would Tuesday mornings work? Would Thursday evenings work? Would Wednesday afternoons work? So something that is very preset, and that those are the choices. Because if they tell you that they would like to have it, if you leave that open and they tell you that they'd like to have it at 11 o'clock on Monday nights, you're probably not going to do that. It's not actionable at that point. So these are the choices that you want to give them to choose from. So another example might be, guess what, guys? The library has more time or more money to add some hours this week. So we'd like to know what hours you want us to be open. So again, if you just leave it as an open-ended question, there's not going to be a good way for you to use that information. So use those time blocks. Is it Tuesday evening? Is it Saturday morning? Is it Wednesday afternoon? Another quickie one here, and I actually have a sidelight on this one too. Using incentives is another good way to get people to fill out surveys. What I have found in the library world is, I think it goes back to something Sam said earlier before we opened the room, and that is people like libraries. And if they respect your library and they know that you need this information, libraries tend to get a higher percentage of people actually completing a survey than a lot of other places. If the city just sends it out, you may get 30% back or 25% back. If the library sends something library specific, you're going to get a little bit higher percentage of those coming back. So I have found in the library business, we tend not to use incentives because we get a pretty good number back anyway. If you're doing something a little bit more general though, think about an incentive. If you bring it in, if it's an online one and you bring in the last page that says you completed it, throw it in a bowl and we'll draw a name for a prize. Or if you fill it out, we give you a library pen or whatever it is. So certainly one other effective way for getting those is using some kind of incentives. Lori, that's a really good question. And Rosalind, we're going to talk in a second about surveys to non-users. I've got something coming up here. So we'll sort of talk through that one a little bit later. But using that sort of other category, I don't know, Bon, what do you think about that? I think some kind of other question is always good because there's going to be something you didn't ask about that somebody would like to talk about. But again, if only one person uses that other and says, they want it on, Tuesday afternoons, you can't do much with that. So Bonnie, what do you think about that question?
You mean in addition to the preset time blocks, right, to give them another option? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm okay with that, but I don't think that would give you much to go on, really. I don't know what you could do with it if 3 people out of 100 indicate a different time block than what you've given them to choose from. Maybe there's another way to phrase it and not another time frame, but is there something else that is there another program? Is there another would there be another opportunity? Right. Would there be another book discussion group that would that would better suit your needs. Would if you can't come in person, maybe the better way to phrase it would be, would you be interested in joining an online book discussion group? So maybe not so much another time block, but another format option, I think maybe might be more easier to take action on.
And Amy, I think you're right. All of the above, because sometimes people, allow them to say, I could do Tuesday or Thursday or Wednesday, whichever one of those works.
Oh, right.
So that's a really great one. And again, none of these works for me. So yes, absolutely have that as part of your.
Yeah,
whether it's.
It doesn't need to be an either or necessarily. And that's why we like these, the survey software so much, like SurveyMonkey. We're pretty accustomed to SurveyMonkey. You can set the answer choices to be only one choice can be made or multiple choices can be made. So that I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that's a good point to make.
Oh, and this is me too. This was a kind of a nice one. Bonnie brought this example out about Lamar's. So just a quick Facebook poll. And again, that's certainly a type of survey. They were going to revamp their website and they wanted to know, which word triggers for you what it is that we want to accomplish. So the question that they asked, do you want to put that one up there? What wording do you like best for a clickable button? So it makes people think. And again, one question survey, fast and easy, you're going to get a lot of responses with this one. I really like that.
I like it too.
Here's the two choices. Would you use the word browse? Does that mean if you want to search for something, would you use the word, or would you like to find books and more? Which one makes more sense to you? So I thought that was a cool one. And then I guess I didn't even see this. The answer to that question, 53% said find books and more. That to me is really tricky though, because that's so close to half and half. You could be useful with either of those.
It's just over the halfway mark that I would go with books and more. To me, browse is you can be doing that if you're in a shoe store, if you're in a clothing store, but find books and more. I like the concept behind that one. And you're right. I mean, quick and easy, and a lot of good responses on that one. If those of you listening in want to share similar quickie little polls and questions that you've done, we're all ears. We would love to gather more samples like this. We're always in the hunt for samples to share. If you were looking to ask a certain age group of people, maybe your boomer crowd, maybe seniors, if you wanted to ask something about tech training, or there are people's interest in maybe using the library to come in for help with their mobile devices, with their personal devices, these are some questions you could ask if that is your pursuit. Back to OCLC research, they've done so much research. So has the Pew Internet research about just how dialed into technology are boomers and seniors, and it turns out they are very dialed in record numbers to online pursuits and to social networking, and maybe more than you would think. So if you wanted to see if your own community kind of mirrors how dialed in people are nationally speaking, would these trends that OCLC and Pew Research have found out nationally hold true locally? So again, these are kind of, you can take general survey questions, but apply them to a much more specific audience. So level of support. I teased on that one just earlier in our time, and how that is not a very frequently asked question, maybe because libraries don't have that many occasions to ask level of support questions. But when you do have the occasion to ask such questions about a patron's willingness to support, or either philosophically or support financially or support in terms of volunteerism, the library's efforts, you don't have to look much farther than this publication. This comes to us also from OCLC, From Awareness to Funding, and it came out in 2018. This booklet is freely available to download on the website you see on the screen. And it shows the actual research methodology. It shows all the questions that were asked, and it presents all the findings of this national study that tried to get at people's how people feel about their public library, how they feel about it emotionally versus how connected is that emotional attachment to their pocketbook. How connected do they feel about a library? And then in terms of how willing, though, are they to actually support a bond issue or a referendum where the library is on the ballot? So, it may not be only building projects where you could ask these kinds of support questions. I like this question. This gets at level of awareness and how people understand, or maybe don't as well understand, how their local library is funded. I love this kind of question to toss in there, but you have to pick your spots. You would want to find the right survey situation for this. But what if you were trying to get at level of support? If not a giant new building you're trying to build, what about if you were thinking of passing, in Iowa, we have something called the Special Library Levy, also called the 27-cent levy. And if your board and a steering group was interested in learning more about that process, how to get that ballot measure out there for people to vote on, it has to be in odd numbered years, right, Becky? The 27-cent levy, I think. Is that true?
I looked that one up.
You did, or
no? I look it up when I need to
okay.
know the answer to that one. Sorry,
I
don't have that one off the top of my head.
That's like on a need to know basis, but I kind of sort of think it's done in odd numbered years. So, ramping up to learn more about that, to kind of gauge what do we think would be the level of response in our community, that could be a great reason to ask some level of support questions. Or, we thought of this too. What if your library was thinking about establishing a friends group, and you're in that research and development stage where you're gathering information and you're having discussions and you're thinking about pulling together a steering group of people who might want to push this project farther down the field? That would be at a good time to get that level of support. Would people be willing to contribute financially in terms of membership fees to a friends group? Would they be able to contribute some volunteer time to a library's friends group? So those level of input, level of awareness questions, you can get some really good ideas from awareness to funding.
And I'm going to jump in too with a level of awareness. Those of you who were with us last time might remember, or maybe the first one, or I don't remember. At some point, Bonnie told the story about how she likes to include questions about, did you know that the library has these things? And I think that gets at the level of awareness, and it does two things. The first one is, yes, you find out, well, I didn't know the library had that. But the other thing it does is it's a really sneaky way to now make them aware of it.
Oh, right.
So in the guise of a survey that you're asking things, all of a sudden they say, well, I didn't know the library had cake pans. So that level of awareness can sort of be twofold when you're putting together a survey. You ask, did you know that we had these things? And so you find out, maybe we need to promote this more, but you also get the information out there that, yes, indeed, we do have these things to the folks who actually filled that out. So that's another really sneaky way, I think, of using that level of awareness.
Yeah, that's a good one. And, if your response rate comes back, like you said, really, really low, 5% answered nope, or 5%, 95%, what am I trying to say, answered nope, didn't know that the library provides downloadable ebooks. Well, now you have some marching orders. Now you know that maybe the problem is with low usage. The problem is too many people just are not aware that the library is even providing this. So now you really got to ramp up your efforts at promoting your digital resources. Yeah. Oh, we love this.
This is one of my favorite things. I have to say, Libraries Transform is a project that was put together by the American Library Association and a variety of other agencies that were out there. And they put together these because statements. If you haven't looked at Libraries Transform, take a look at it. Like Bonnie said, it's one of our favorite things. But what occurred to me as I was thinking about this is the question that they ask, those because statements are really, when we ask patrons to fill that out, they're really a one question satisfaction survey.
Yeah.
It also, I think, could be an impact survey.
It is impact, yeah.
So, the question is, why do you love your library? You hand that out to all of your patrons on a little form, and they will talk to you about all of the reasons that they like to give there. Those make great testimonials, as Bonnie said, and put those out there on your social media, on your website, paper them up on your walls, make them into a brochure or a book and hand them to your city council and say, these are the reasons that we fund libraries, because people believe that the library does this for them. So there's lots of ways of doing those sort of satisfaction surveys, or those like I said, another one question impact information, but they can also be used in very different ways. You're not going to, you get back that 90% of the people loved your story hour. Does that mean you're just not going to change anything ever because they loved it the way it was? No. So you're not going to act on the information in that way, but you can still use that information when you go to your funders, when you go to your board, when you're making a case to increase the salary of your youth services librarian. So there's lots of ways that you can use this, and we'll talk about that more in the next one. I think that's all I was supposed to say there. From the resource list, Rosalind, is where I kind of wanted to get into that, figuring out how do you get those non-users. Again, we're all really good at handing out a survey or putting something on our website to the people who use the library already. But how do you get to those people who don't know you exist? I mean, we still hear that. We invite people to come in for a focus group and they said, I didn't even know the library was here, or I didn't know you had that, or I didn't know they had these kinds of hours. One of the ways is this, what they call an intercept survey, and there's a little bit more information about it in the resources that we're going to provide at the end of the list. But it's the use of the word intercept is very intentional. You're going to get these people where they are. So you have a team of volunteers who go to the grocery store on Saturday mornings, with permission, of course. And they've got their clipboards and they, approach people that are coming in the door and they say, we've got a 5-question survey for you. Do you have a minute to do that? Probably on the way in is better than on the way out. So go to the grocery store. Every library also does a lot of work. If you haven't been familiar with them before, you might take a look at some of the information that they have on their website. One of the things they strongly recommend is going out into neighborhoods. And I believe I attended a session that the library director at Cedar Rapids Public did, and she and her staff literally took their clipboards and went door to door. And it wasn't just knocking on doors, but it was, finding the guy in his driveway as he's working on his car. Think about a survey that's got a question on there about, were you aware of this fact that we have Chilton manuals at the library? So it's an opportunity to get to people who have probably never been through your doors. So again, that intercept, find out where they are and go to where they are. Maybe it's a mom's group that meets at the school, or a knitting club that meets at the store, the yarn shop downtown. So figure out who it is that you're trying to get to, figure out where they are, and go to them with those surveys. And I will say, in the information on this intercept survey, they talk about this is a fairly high degree of difficulty. You've got to do a really good job of the questions, and it takes the right kind of person to be able to do this. This is not something I could do, but I know a lot of people who are really great at this. They love going out and meeting people and talking to strangers. Those are the people you want to be doing this type of survey. They have little tips in there, like, the people that are walking in the grocery store, approach the ones who have a smile on their face. I thought that was sort of an interesting piece of advice. So this one takes a little bit more thought and a little bit more getting the right person to go out and do these, but I think it's a really effective way to do it.
Well, and we want focus group people too to be made up of both users and non-users. I mean, that's equally important if you're bringing together people in person to talk with you in a focus group format. Well, we're about wrapping it up here, and this slide we wanted to show are just some various software products out there that can help you design and send your surveys electronically. We're really big fans of this, and I really don't think you can launch any kind of a survey effort, frankly, without using some kind of software. It's great for helping you design it, and most of these software programs, once you design it in the software, you can print it to paper and have some paper copies available at the checkout desk to share with people, tuck it inside the books as they're checking out. It really makes the process more efficient and more effective, and the tabulation is 100 times easier when the software is tabulating it for you. Now, the one thing I want to make mention of is Checkmarket. That is a survey product that you couldn't purchase, but it's pretty spendy. SurveyMonkey, on the other hand, you can get a free version of SurveyMonkey. I'm not sure that's true of Checkmarket, but the reason I included Checkmarket on the slide is because on their website, they have this really nice calculator that kind of helps you determine the sample size of your target size of surveys that you want to send out, and then how many surveys should you expect to get back to get a valid sampling. So it's an easy calculator to use. There's a lot of them out there, but I just kind of liked that one on Checkmarket. So do look at some of these products and see which one might best fit your needs.
The other thing that I want to say about the online ones is I have been seeing a lot of QR codes now. So
oh, yeah.
on the back of your monitor at the circ desk, you've got a QR code for a quick 5-question survey. They take a picture with their phone, they go into their phone, they do the online survey, and it's done before they leave the building. Or like Bonnie said, you put the little QR code inside of the book. They can do that when they get home, and they find that and answer another quick survey that you've done. And I think Bonnie's right. In a lot of cases, those online products are so much easier to use because it's so much easier to tabulate. Otherwise you got to have somebody sit through one by one and go through and tabulate them all. The other thing that I know I've said this story multiple times and I can't remember exactly where I've told it now, but one of the libraries told me that what they did after story hours, they were using the project outcome surveys. And what they did after a story hour is they loaded it up on about 6 tablets. So as those mothers were coming out of the story hour, they handed them a tablet and said, would you take a minute and do this? The person finished it, they hit the tabulate button and submitted it, and they just loaded it up again and handed it to the next person in line. Fast and easy way to get people before they even leave your building. I thought that was a really great idea. So to kind of recap, we talked about some of the things that you're going to try to get at when you're doing surveys. Are they aware of your services? That's one thing. How satisfied are they with the program that you did? Would they support this in whatever way, shape, or form you need that, whether it's financial or something else? And what kind of an impact has it made on their life? Hopefully you got some good information. And again, you can go back to that and see, the recommendations that are out there for what makes a good actual question for it. And then there's hopefully some sources for you to go out and look at some good questions. I guess my main point on this, and I say this over and over, whether it's focus groups or surveys or any kind of other data gathering that you're doing, always know the reason you're asking the question. Sometimes we say, oh, it'd be nice to know if people, liked this, or it would be nice to know. Have a specific reason. What are we going to do with the information that we get back? People are surveyed to death anymore. So I think that will help you focus your survey and write a better survey, and it will probably also help you get better results that you can actually do something with. So here's a list of a couple of resources. Some of these were on the one that we did last time. The Web Junction, the first one, the sample information gathering tools, is one of those places where you can go to get actual sample questions. They have a list of maybe 25 different ones that were actually used. I will caution you, they were done in 2012. Mm-hmm. So, take a look at some of those. Some are better than others, I think. My favorite article is the second Web Junction one, Smart Spaces, Baskets of Community Discovery Tools. They break it down into 3 pieces, one of which we've not really talked about. They talk about focus groups and they talk about surveys, but they also talk about using the visual ones, whether it's a board where people put up pictures or they do dots on the one that they like that you have in the library. So they've got some really great ideas for visual ways to get information back. I really liked that there. And then I think we'll talk more about that fourth one next time. Now that we've got all this data, what the heck do we do with it?
Right. If from these sources you guys just spend time on just one of them, that's Smart Spaces, Baskets of Community Discovery. That's one of the best articles we came across in a long time. Yeah, that's fun. And maybe, Becky, when we do presentation pointers next time, using that visual component to that article would be really fun when we repeat presentation pointers. Well, if you have other questions that we haven't addressed yet since our time together, please share those. This is one of my favorite quotes in this context, but it also works in the personal side of life too, right? We can't act on input until we ask for input. Thanks to Ben Franklin, he that won't be counseled can't be helped. There you go. We hope you'll come back again in September for the 3rd installment in Acting on Input. We'll talk more about using all of these results in your strategic plan.
And I see the question from Jacob. And actually, Jacob, I think that was on one of my slides in my notes that I was supposed to say, yes, you really should ask permission before you post the testimonials.
Oh, right.
That they do. Yes. And I was supposed to mention that and I didn't. So thank you for the question.
Yes. Testimonials are best when you can attach a real life person's name to it. Yes, because otherwise anybody could say that. Our whole staff could spend an afternoon writing good testimonials, but attach it to a real person, and that's the way to go.
I also think you could phrase it as something like, do you have a testimonial we can share with your first name or something like that as part of the question? Even it could be just at the end of the question, or include your first name if this is something we can post in our annual report or something like that. But lots of ways to do that for sure. Did you also see the suggestion? I think this is a good one and a good way to get it out to people really quickly. But so often we're tucking bookmarks into things promoting different programs or different services that the library offers. Just have your general library satisfaction, your 3 to 5 question library satisfaction survey be on that bookmark that you are tucking into things via QR code or something, and then everyone always has it. I think this is becoming a little more common too. If you have a customer service interaction with a for-profit agency of some sort, often you'll get a follow-up email that's like, how satisfied are you? And you just get those 5 smiley faces and you can click a smiley face. So, and sometimes it's just that and in any other comments kind of thing. And I think that's a really great way to get rolling feedback as well. We have a question that came in to hosts and panelists. If you do want to do an incentive, or a prize, how can you do that with an online survey and a paper survey?
I think one of the things, it was in the notes someplace, I don't remember if I said it or Bonnie said it, but those of you who were doing CE back a long time ago, at the very end of our Survey Monkey, you were able to print a certificate. You could do the same thing with a Survey Monkey or a Google form that says, you know, print this, bring it to the library, drop it in the fishbowl, and we'll draw for prizes at the end of the week. So I think that would be one way to do it with the online. And certainly the paper survey as well. I'm sure there are other ways. Anybody else got ideas?
I think you could have a question in your online survey that said, you know, click here if you want to be entered into the drawing.
Yeah.
And then you as the librarian could, because that would also save somebody the trip to the library if they're not going out in public, or if they're a heavy virtual user, that kind of thing. But maybe you want people in the doors, and then you say, bring this ticket to the library. You could do, or you could also have two pizza prizes, one for the online people and one for the in-person people. But
and the in-person ones, I absolutely have seen it where instead of drawing for a prize, everybody that fills it out, you know, at the grocery store, maybe you've worked out a deal and they get a piece of candy when they fill out your I mean, tiny incentive, but sometimes that's all it takes.
Thanks to Becky and Bonnie this morning, and thanks to all of you for being with us. Get out there and go on a little walk, enjoy the sunshine, and have a great rest of your day.
And we'll hopefully see you in a month.
We'll see you next month. Yep.